Welcome everyone to another Weekdone webinar. For everyone who is joining for the very first time, my name is Anna, and I will be assisting Richard today during the webinar. And your presenter for today is Richard Snaith, who is the head of customer success and the team of OKR coaches here at Weekdone. And the topic for today is the 5 things that you can improve to have more impactful OKRs. As you're all preparing right now for Q2, some of you might not have drafted your OKRs just yet. We thought it might be a good idea to reflect on the learnings from Q1 and improve the process that you currently have in your organization. The video of this webinar will be sent out to everyone who registered within 24 hours. And we do hope that during this webinar, you get as many answers to the questions that you have as possible. So please leverage the Q&A section in Zoom. If you hover over your Zoom window, you should see a menu panel. And on that menu panel, there is a small icon that says Q&A. Please post your questions there. If you're coming to this webinar already with a list of things that you want to have answers to, now is a good time to start posting there, because we have the team of OKR coaches here today to assist you with answering your questions as the webinar is moving along. Another thing that I'd like to share is that Richard is going to start the poll, so you should be seeing it right now on your screens. If you could take one moment to say, what is your role with OKRs in your company? This will help us to fine-tune our answers to your questions at the end of the session, because yes, we're going to have a live Q&A at the end of the session where you can also ask some of your questions live, but we will compile a list of the most interesting or the most frequently asked questions during this webinar, and we'll make sure to have them answered. Please take this opportunity to ask your questions about the OKR process. Even if it's a little bit maybe outside of the scope of today's webinar, that's okay too, because this way we will know what kind of topics are on your mind and what we can build our next webinar about. Also, after this session, along with a recording, you're going to receive a link with a few questions about this webinar, and we would love to get your feedback so that we can make these sessions more useful for you and well, more productive, right? So please take this opportunity to get as much information as you need during this session and ask as many questions as you would like. And we'll be here assisting you with answering those questions. And so far, Richard, take it away. Have a nice webinar.
Super. Thank you, Anna. As Anna said, my name is Richard. Quickly to cover the agenda. So first of all, we're going to talk about developing team OKRs. Then using OKRs to prioritize and influence the plans and projects we work on, discussing a little bit about the execution of those plans and projects and how they drive the OKR progress, OKR alignment, dependencies across the organization, something that we get a lot of questions on and a lot of confusion on as well. We're then going to talk about the last element, which is really about sharing and retrospectives of OKRs. How do we make the OKRs really alive within an organization? We'll give a quick summary, and then as Anna mentioned, we're going to do Q&A. We're going to do a live Q&A session, so please ask the questions as needed. So let's get started, a lot to cover. So the first thing, and something I read the other day from one LinkedIn OKR group, was somebody talking about what's the biggest improvement with OKRs? And they talked about writing good OKRs. A lot of times when people start out, you know, it's a combination of where they've been in the past. Often it's about what we do versus the outcome. So, you know, a key result is not really about what we need to do. It's not about working on our SEO strategy. It's about the outcome we want. We want to get ourselves in a certain position, let's say in Google search, so we get a good number of leads. It's not that we want to write blog articles. We want people to read, or maybe in this case, we want people to read and go to our sign-up form. That's why we're writing the articles. And then maybe have a successful exhibition. Well, yes, of course we want that, but getting that 1,000 sign-ups qualified from the exhibition might be what we're actually looking to achieve. So writing good KRs is really all about getting good outcomes to drive the discussions and thoughts. If you imagine the first one's there, it's almost telling us what to do, whereas the second one's giving us an outcome, which means we will try to achieve the outcome through plans, projects, tasks, and what we do. But it's about adapting, changing, discussing what worked, what didn't. And making OKRs engaging is super important. Now, that's great. But what about where we can't come up with a measurement? What about where developing the marketing strategy to grow, for example, is what we need? It can be that we develop milestones, and it's quite okay to sometimes put milestones in. The outcome here is I want to complete the document, and simply split it into easy, recognizable elements. So first one, draft. If we mark that stage done, we're 25%, review 50%, finalize 75%. And when I've published it, I've finished. Great. We're actually going to come back to that to think about, is that really all I can do there? But it is okay, and milestones are often better than just 0 to 100%, where it's very arbitrary. This way, as I move it through the different stages, I can clearly show progress. Now, the other thing that tends to happen, and we're going to cover it in a little more detail in the next section, but in a lot of cases, people start to put KPIs as well as projects together. So the KPI we all have, we want to achieve a certain revenue or a certain number of leads. But putting those out there maybe is just duplicating what we already have. If we already got the sales targets or KPIs in other locations, just reiterating those targets doesn't help people drive them. The KPIs let's come back to that for a second. In the second one here, we're actually improving the customer sales. We've got a good objective that isn't the KPI, but we put the KPIs down below. And again, it doesn't help us actually think about what we're going to do to get those revenue numbers. It's telling us what the revenue numbers are. Basically using the OKR format just to reiterate KPIs or KPIs and projects. KR measurement types, and there's really 3 types of typical measurements. The first one, where we have data. So in this case, reduce first-time response rates from 90 to 10 minutes. Great. To do that, we have to be able to look at the prior period. So we know that we're at 90, and we know we'd like to achieve 10 minutes. And we can put from to. This is always the best type of KR measurement in a sense. It's very direct. You can very directly see the improvements from where we're going to where we're trying to get to. Excellent, excellent way to write it. Could be increasing and decreasing. It could be counting up, but in this case, I'm trying to go from a first-time response rate of 90 minutes to a shorter first-time response of 10 minutes. So it could be in either direction. A lot of times we're going to be starting at 0. It's basically we're going to increase cumulatively. In this example, we're launching a help center and we want to get a certain number of views. We want to get people viewing our help articles, and that should help them and meet the customer expectation with support they love. We haven't got maybe a support center. We don't have the prior data. Secondly, views are cumulative. So there's combinations here of not having the data. It might be we have to estimate the views. It's not always guaranteed. We don't know exactly how many we get, but we can estimate it. And the last type of measure is often a quality measure. So in this example here, we're looking at making sure if we reduce the response rates, we're not necessarily just reducing the quality of the response. We're trying to maintain or improve the quality of responses, and this will balance the improvement. So we don't just improve time, we don't focus on a single measure or metric. It could be above or below. In this case, it's over 80% 4 or 5 star rating. So it could be under a certain number of bugs or issues, for example. So those are the 3 types of measurements for outcomes. Now, we did talk about developing the marketing strategy and how we could measure this, and the stages are clear. Splitting things into stages where you can't work out how to measure is okay. You will always find some areas that you need to include as KRs where you're going to have to split it into stages. However, why are we developing the marketing strategy? It could be that really we could measure maybe an outcome here. We could look at 4 to 5 peers agree with the strategy, or I'm going to have it reviewed by 5 other executives in the company. And if 4 of them agree that this is a good strategy, that's maybe good. That's the outcome of writing the document, that we have a good marketing strategy. So sometimes you just have to think a little bit laterally about how we're going to measure it. It doesn't have to be sort of exact, but maybe some indirect or lateral thinking with the measurements can sometimes help. We're going to come on to measurement stability. Now, I put this example of 90 to 10 minutes, great. And we have some data. And last quarter, we measured the first time response rates. And here's a graph, and we can see some variability in the graph. Now, this is the data. This is the way it is. And yes, we have an average of 90. So that's where we've got our first starting point. We have an average of 90 minutes for our first time response rate. Now, the issue here is if I measured at this point here, would be 51. So we're doing really well. We're 30% progress or 37% progress on our OKR. But there again, if I measured here somewhere, we're 140 minutes, and that's 0. We have made no progress. It's a problem, really, because if I was working on something and I saw it good, and then it got worse, and then it went back to the average of 90, I wouldn't feel great about it. It makes people kind of feel they're getting somewhere, but knowing they didn't do anything to make it happen, or it gets worse after it got better. And setting good measurements that really show progress is super important. Now, this just means that the natural variation, the daily, weekly, monthly variation, means we have to rethink about how we're going to measure it. Now, if we could look into the future, and this dark blue line is showing the progress of the data over the next quarter. So when we're actually working on the OKR, we've got our crystal ball out here and we can see how things are going. And we can still see some variations, increases, decreases, and a drop towards the end. And we've looked at this and we thought it through and we said, well, probably the best way to measure this is to do a 90-day rolling average. So we know that this 90 is actually a 90-day average. If we use a rolling average, we would see better progress or steadier progress over time in us reducing it. So if we take that dark blue line and we average it for 90 days, great. The line looks good. We see progress over time. However, we only reach 60 over the end of the quarter because we're going from 90 to 10 and the way things worked. And it might be we pick 50 or 60 as a number, but we know we're not going to reach 10. Yes, we actually reached 10, and we would need to reach 10 to get the 90-day average from 90 to there. That means we need to change that 10 minutes. We need to set it to 60. If we left it at 10, it would be very frustrating for people. They would be working hard. They would say, well, we've achieved the 10 minutes, but because of the averaging, it's not working. And these thoughts about how do we measure, what do we measure, what averages do we use? There's a lot of things to think through with OKRs and measurements themselves. The measurement variability, the targets, the averaging, particularly where it's from to and it's something that's variable. If you're counting views or something like that, it's cumulative and much more steady, which is great. Now, another question, one we get asked a lot, is basically, okay, how many OKRs for a team? And it's exceptionally difficult to answer that question. But let's split it into the parts. How much time, improvement time? Our OKRs are about improving. So 20% improvement time, 1 day a week for a team. And is that per one person in the team has that 1 day of the week? Does everybody in the team have a day a week? How many improvement hours does the team have? And then how many hours effort is needed to go into OKR? We have one side of the equation is how many improvement hours, and the second is how big is our OKR? How complex is it? How much time are we going to need to spend on it to drive it forward? Might also be we have 40% improvement time, 2 days a week, and maybe it's for the whole team. Maybe we could do a couple of OKRs this quarter, and maybe another team has 80% improvement time. Some teams are very much there about driving improvements in the organization. They might be able to do more OKRs, or they might still have less OKRs, but more impactful, more complicated, harder to drive. A lot of times when starting out, you have to be really, really careful. You don't know how many OKRs a team can do, and it's going to be different for different teams in the organization. Often starting with one OKR per team and learning and understanding how to measure how big an OKR and how much time do we have is really, really helpful to make things work well. So let's move on to using OKRs to prioritize influential plans and projects. And what I want to do is start where people often do. And a lot of companies have KPIs and they have projects. And the relationship is in a sense that we work on the projects, those drive the KPIs forward. Great. In a sense, yeah, absolutely. The projects drive the KPIs. However, over what time? How long is the project? Can we see near term how well the project influences the KPIs? Do the projects always make an impact? A lot of times businesses have found out that some projects make improvements, some make no difference, and some make things worse. And it's common the projects don't always work. The completion of the project to the KPI improvement could be a long dwell time. It could be, for example, we have a sales cycle of 6 months and we work on a sales improvement project over 4 weeks and we finish it. And it's going to take 6 months before we see the KPIs move. And often we presume that that project drove the KPIs forward, but it's presumed. We probably don't go back and check it, or we don't relate it, or we can't relate in the near term whether it was successful. We then start off with taking our KPIs and our projects, and we add a KPI to the objective, reach 10 million in new sales or increase new leads to 10,000 a week. But the KPI really only measures past success. The numbers from the past and the target for the future is really a dream, especially if it's growing. If we only did 5 million in new sales in last quarter, now we want to double it. That number might be unobtainable, might be obtainable. It depends what we do to improve things to drive that. Often the next step is we take all the things we've been working on, the things we think we need to work on, the projects, the initiatives, plans, whatever you want to call them, and we put them into the KRs and off we go. We basically have a KPI and projects. However, is this really good? You know, we add some numbers maybe, because some of them we don't have numbers, and then are we expecting things to change? Do we actually expect improvements in our goal setting methods? We really haven't done anything differently. We've used a format of objective and key results to just format what we've already been doing, and then expecting some improvements in the way things are working in a company, and just reformatting it, reiterating it usually doesn't drive the business forward. However, it's not the end of the world, because all of us start there. We often all start with this KPIs, projects, what we're going to do, ideas in our OKR. But let's stand back a second. Let's take it and split it out to the different sections. So first, let's take our increased leads from 100 to 200 per week, and let's make that into our KPI or metric. 200 per week, 13 weeks in a quarter. That means we're going to try and achieve 2,600 over the quarter. We've set our target, and now we're going to change our objective to be something that's qualitative, describing what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to drive our impactful lead sources to be the best. Then let's take a look at our projects. And these projects really need moving down and become the projects that we're going to work on. For example, SEO strategy, blog, etc. So we now have an objective, but no key results. And if I take the SEO strategy back to saying, well, why are we doing it? Well, we want to get 10 keywords in the top 1 to 3 positions. That's the outcome measure. And we've done the same for the blog and for the exhibition. We've got blog articles, reads to sign up form over 400 and get 1,000 qualified leads from the exhibition. These are measuring the outcomes of the project. So as we work on the projects, we should see the outcomes change. It wasn't so difficult, but somewhat simplified. What really often happens is once we've got our objective, we have to think through, what are we going to do? How are we going to measure? And here we're going to loop through. It often isn't that you can instantly write them. You might start from the projects and plans. You might start from the measurable outcomes, but cycling through those a number of times until you're happy that we have the measurable outcomes and the projects and plans, at least at a high level, defined for what we're going to do. You need both. You need to think about what you're going to do. We need to complete the SEO strategy project. Completing that project and doing it well will drive 10 keywords into the top 1 to 3 positions. Or actually, we hope it will. There's never a guarantee, but as we're measuring the outcomes, we're going to be able to see it. And then we might see the KPI change. It could be, though, a huge delay. It could be that we get to the top 3 positions. It's going to take 3 or 6 months for that work that we've done to actually impact the KPI. And that's why we have an OKR here, something that we can drive and measure from the project to the measurable outcomes of the OKR. It gives us much shorter visibility to understand, are we working on the right things to drive the key results forward? Let's talk about the execution of the projects and plans. And I mean, all of us kind of understand the basics of projects. We have a start date, we have a length of project or an end date, and great, simple. Might be 4 weeks, might be 6 weeks. We might have a 6-week project that starts in the 5th week of the quarter. All simple. We might have multiple projects that drive OKRs forward in the quarter. Now, if we take a 6-week project, in some cases, we're going to use more agile methods. And here, I'm going to break it into 2-week sprints. And when I say sprint, I mean we're going to basically work on the tasks to complete the sprint, and we're going to launch. So we're going to get really multiple outputs. We're going to get the sprint output to see, does it drive an OKR forward? What I mean by that is, let's take a 2-week sprint, and while we're working on it, probably we don't get any progress from our key result. Now, we finish the sprint, there'll be some delay. So we finish and launch, we do something, whatever it is. There'll be some form of delay in the outcomes we're trying to measure. Then we hope we'll see the key results move forward, and then we will try working on the next sprint. We'll see a delay, and we'll start to see outcomes change. So the key result is progressing from the sprint launches. Quite simple. You know, we have to work on something. We have to change something to make an outcome move. What happens if the project and sprint is 6 weeks long? And it could be. We might have something more complicated. Well, of course, the problem is there that you're going to have a 6-week dwell. You're going to have the same delay between completing a project, launching it 6 weeks later, starting to see the progress. Yes, we'll start working on the next 6-week sprint, but maybe we saw progress and the progress has stopped until we launch the next sprint. We get the delay and we start to see progress again. But that progress is already moving outside the quarter. We won't maybe see the full impact of what we worked on until the next quarter or partway through the next quarter. So we need to think a little bit about how we do it. Now, the other very agile way is weekly. We could have a weekly sprint even. And some teams work well on sprints. Often they don't think about it as a sprint. They say, well, we'll do A, B, and C this week and see how it goes. Next week, we'll do A, B, and C, or C, D, E, and see how it works, so on and so on. Very, very agile. And it might work in marketing groups and sales groups, but probably in a more complex product group or operational group, it maybe isn't possible to do it so quick. It just depends. For some people, the project, it could be hardware. It could be something that's going to take a year to develop, or it might be we have no product yet. And we need to get that first launch of something to complete. And then we're going to basically set the OKR after we finish the project. The project launches and then we write an OKR. Might not make sense to write an OKR for the project itself. It might, however, but once we've launched it, we can start to develop the sprints and we can see the progress forward. It depends on probably the team and what that team does and how long it takes. And also at the company, what stage it's at. Is it very early stage or is it far later, more developed where it can test and try improvements out? It needs to be thought through. There's nothing more infuriating than writing an OKR, having long project sprint cycles and not seeing any progress in the quarter, kind of knowing that maybe something's going to happen in the future, but you don't see it. The project sprints are as important as the OKRs. Thinking about what you do to drive the OKRs forward, and can we action things that will make the key results move? In a sense, we need to make sure we pick the right key results and we need to have the right ideas for the project sprints to move it forward. Let's talk about OKR alignment, and we're going to talk a little bit about sort of the basic alignment and dependencies across the organization. Now, when we think about overall alignment, a lot of companies will take the vision, mission, strategy, and really it's often the strategy part, which is a shorter term development roadmap, and then we'll say, right, what is it from the strategy that we need to drive in the quarter? Or if we've got company KPIs that are either growing or they are off track, that is what the leadership would define as the company objective for the quarter. And what they're going to do then is share that direction with the teams to set OKRs. Why? It's alignment. This is from the leadership down. This is a direction. It comes from OKRs growing or off track, or it comes from the strategy, but it isn't the company KPIs and it isn't the strategy, it's a direction for improvement. Sharing that with the teams and giving context to allow the teams allows the teams to write the best OKRs they could. So they understand what is it we need to focus on and what is it we need to spend our improvement time on. And that aligns up to the company objective. It's not the only reason why teams might develop an OKR. The other one is, of course, that the team KPIs could be off track. The teams might be behind. They might be off track with one of their team KPIs. And it might be that we need to focus also some time on getting that back on track. In a sense, this is the first level of alignment. This is often where people talk about cross-functional, cross-alignment, shared OKRs. In a sense, setting a company level objective drives common focus across the organization. Now, let's talk about some of the cross-team collaboration, because it often gets very complicated and people read a lot about shared OKRs and cross-functional and cross-departmental teams, etc. What do we mean by that? And we need to think through what we mean. Well, one of the versions, Team 1 has an OKR, and that OKR aligns to Team 2's objective, i.e. completing of this Team 1 objective is going to be part of success for Team 2 achieve their OKR. It means that this item is big. It's something for a quarter. You know, Team 2's objective is obviously big, but Team 1, to set it as an OKR, it has to be a major element we want to drive forward. Could be that it's not a major item, and really what we need from Team 1 is project or plans to support Team 2. It's a different level. Might be something that's going to take a week for a person in Team 1, or a few days, or even 2 or 3 weeks maybe. But it's not a whole objective. It's a plan or project that supports Team 2. And the third one is really about where we're going to build hybrid teams. You know, a team doesn't have to be a functional team. A lot of times when you start OKRs, teams will start with, you know, a sales team, a marketing team, a product team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Very functional. Some of them will learn later that the best way they drive improvements is to actually build a team to fix a major problem in an organization, or a major directional change or improvement in an organization. And what they'll do is basically build a hybrid team from Team 1 and Team 2, which has its own OKRs. It's cross-functional team itself. It has an OKR to improve something major for the organization. And a lot of times, are you going to build a team? Are you going to align OKRs across the organization? It needs thinking through. It's one of the areas you can make things extremely complicated, and it's something that often people overthink and overcomplicate. And I want to come on to sharing and retrospectives, which is really the last section here. Just to start off, you know, let's think about a quarter cycle. So develop the C-level objectives. Our C-level or our CEO has developed the objectives, has set into motion the teams to develop their OKRs, and the teams are then thinking about what are they going to do to drive the team OKRs forward, plans, deliverables as a team. Now, one of the first steps is a team check-in. And what do we mean by team check-in? With really, it's a weekly or bi-weekly check-in. We're going to first look at the OKR progress. Are we on or off track with our OKR? Meaning, are we making the progress we expected for the progress of time in the quarter? Have we completed or have we launched something that should drive KR progress? Meaning, our plans, projects completed, drive some impact on the OKR, on the key KRs themselves. And then what's next? It's basically a learning cycle. If I've completed a plan or project and I've seen progress, great, we can move on to what's next. If it didn't move it, I might have to rethink what we did. Did it work? Did we not execute it well? Was it the wrong thing? We're going to learn from that. And it's super important that this execution versus KR progress to what we do next is exactly what we're focusing on for the team check-ins. Doesn't need to be long and complicated. You know, 15 minutes review as part of a weekly or even a bi-weekly meeting is probably all it takes, but just making sure we understand what worked, what didn't work, and make any adjustments is super important to OKRs. So The next one is mid-quarter review, and it's really about everybody. First of all, team check-ins, now it's really about everybody. And what do we mean with a mid-quarter review? Well, it's really a sharing session. It's about company, leaders sharing, and teams sharing their OKR progress, what's on and off track. How confident are they? Are they feeling good about the OKRs? Is there issues there? What worked? What hasn't? Lessons learned. So one of the big things is everybody's got OKRs, and there'll be what's worked and what hasn't will be seen across the organization. It might be measurement issues. It might be we tried this, but it didn't make any difference. It might be we tried this, but we don't know how to do it, and some other person in the organization can help. It could be the projects that have worked or haven't worked. And it can also be about the OKR process itself. So making sure people can feed back about the process, whether that's the company level, did we set the right objectives? Do we believe we're doing the right things? Or in the team, are there issues or complications in the OKR process, things we still need to understand? It really helps drive improvements in the OKR process, the collaboration and alignment. A lot of times we talked earlier about connecting things together for alignment. The biggest improvement OKRs often make with alignment is things where mid-quarter, and we're going to talk about retros, where we share what we've learned. And other teams understanding what your team is working on and what works for you and why you're doing it is often a great way to create true alignment versus maybe a connecting of different things together, but people not fully understanding what different teams are doing to improve and why. Now, the last one is the end of quarter retros, happening somewhere right at the end of the quarter. But what is it for? Well, it's a bit more detailed than the mid-quarter review. It's again, company and team level, but it's really about documenting what worked and what didn't. What would we do differently? Thinking about how we would improve things, or what do we need to change? What did we learn? What questions do we have? So maybe in the learnings, we've discovered other areas of potential improvements or questions or things we don't understand. It also gives us a chance to give feedback on the OKR process so we can improve it. The idea here is that we would document it and allow people to see and have questions and comments written before. This is just an example here of maybe a document. And a lot of times people can do this in anything they like. It could be a Word document, it could be a Miro board, it could be anything like that. Whatever you like using as an organization. The idea of the meeting itself is not to cover all the details, but really look at the highlights and the questions. So it's all about doing the work up front. The retrospective takes time and thought before the meeting. That's where a lot of the work goes in. But why? Well, it's the end of the quarter. And the end of the quarter is where we're starting to develop the next quarter's OKR. And if we've done a good retrospective and we really understood what works, what hasn't, how did we do, where did we make progress, where didn't we, what's next? If we've done all that in the retrospective, it's going to be much, much easier for the C-level to develop objectives and the teams to develop their team OKRs. And that allows us to move on to the next quarter. So the team check-ins, mid-quarter review, end of quarter retros, they're really all about sharing and communicating, and it's really is the key for OKRs to work. OKRs are a team sport, and making sure people are communicating and sharing will help you immensely. And let's come to a summary. So, but one, don't overthink the alignment or the OKRs. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to think through. There's a lot to learn in the first quarters. In a lot of cases, people overthink, overcomplicate alignment and OKRs. Don't get drawn into that at the start. No one starts with great OKRs, no one. But start and improve. It's a process. You will learn and grow and change as you go forward. Keeping your KPIs, OKRs, and executional elements segmented, they are all important. You have to have your KPIs. You need your OKRs to be able to understand are we doing the right executional things to move the OKRs forward? And you need the executional elements, otherwise the OKRs won't move forward. We won't make improvement progress. They are all important, but they're not the same thing. And muddling them together, it's very common. Whenever we have all written documents and strategic documents, we kind of muddle things together in different timescales, etc. It's keeping them separate, but understanding how they drive each other will help you lay out, whether it's at the company level or whether it's at the team level, the way forward. Sharing and discussing OKRs is critical. It's a team sport. It's not just the team manager or just the C-level. It's about getting everybody working and sharing and discussing and thinking together. The last point is really that retrospective. It will be a huge learning for all. I think one of the things we learned in Weekdone, and yes, we use OKRs, is how important that retrospective. We already understood some years ago we needed to improve it, and we really worked on doing a much better retrospective. But the thing I always take away from that is how much that helped us improve and how it made the next quarter setting far less painful. You know, it wasn't complicated. Once we'd done the retro, we started to see the direction for next quarter immediately and how we could drive improvements. So it's often about communicating, keeping it simple, not overthinking, and just making sure we do the right pieces in the right order of the OKR process. I'm now going to just quickly hand you back to Anna.
Yeah, I just wanted to recommend to everyone who is looking to improve their OKR knowledge, and especially if you are preparing to launch OKRs or to lead the OKR process in your team, the course that you see right now on the screen is a more in-depth look into how the processes behind developing OKRs really work, because you can find a lot of examples on the internet. You can learn from the examples through the webinars, but sometimes it's all about structuring discussions and making sure that you are able to teach people the outcome-focused mindset. So this course is not your typical OKR course where you have just like a bunch of examples all mixed together. It's dedicated to the ways of developing OKRs so that you can teach this to someone else. You can see the link on the screen. It's weekdone.com/OKR-training. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us and we'll be happy to assist you to answer any questions that you might have. So that is it.
Thanks, Anna. I will just quickly share the poll. So basically, OKR champions and leaders and consultants were the big three groups there, but quite a amazing mixture of different people. Excellent. One thing just to finish off with, I just want to give you some contact points. So if you want to email us at Weekdone, hello@weekdone.com. We do also have a LinkedIn Weekdone site, company Weekdone site. We can answer questions there. If you want to email me, Richard@Weekdone, or my LinkedIn is Richard-Snaith. So there we go. Now we come on to the Q&A. So Anna,
we do have some questions, and interestingly, they're mostly about how to use OKRs on top of existing workflows and how to mix and match some of the existing workflows that work well with what OKRs, with how OKRs are supposed to be developed. So it's more of a case study question. Let's take a look, and I will read it out loud so that we can discuss the question. How do you combine your agile team sprints rhythms with writing OKRs? Does it take place as extra meetings or combined with refinement before sprint planning and follow up on the results? Is that sprint review? So how do we use OKRs if the Scrum process is already in place?
Yeah. It could be separate, it could be part of. I mean, the point is that the sprint meeting is typically focused very much on execution. The OKR part of it is very much on, did it drive the outcome forward? Did the completion of the sprint actually drive the outcomes or the changes in the outcomes we wanted? So it absolutely should happen once we completed a sprint. We need to look at the OKRs to understand, did we make progress, or do we believe we're making progress and seeing outcomes change? And that information will allow us to feed back into the next sprint. Does it happen in the same meeting or as a separate meeting? It really depends on how you want to do it. There isn't sort of a fixed way, but often, depending what agile processes you're using, somewhere in those agile processes, there should be outcomes. They should be thinking about what is the outcomes we need to drive. Obviously, you need to complete a sprint to see the changes, to make adaptation to the next sprint or changes to the next sprint. So exactly where it happens isn't critical, meaning same meeting or separate meeting, but it needs to happen. Otherwise, we'll just be executing, launching, executing, launching. We need to understand, did we do the right things in that execution? I hope that answered that question, Anna.
Yeah, I think there is so much that we need to know about your specific use case to be able to answer it in more detail. So if you'd like, you can send us an email explaining how your specific process works, and we'll try to suggest a few recommendations. But earlier today, when Richard was discussing the processes, the sprint reviews, and how the OKR workflows should be structured, I did share in the chat some agendas and some workflows that you might want to consider. So that is a great starting point. You can already look into that article and maybe pick up some things that you could try out and how to combine those things. Actually, the next question is also a lot about the workflows. So let me also read it out loud. And also this is from the same use case, from the same company.
Mm-hmm.
So this question is about quarterly reviews and mid-quarter reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Is the recommendation for quarterly review just to do a mid-quarter review and then only do a retro, and next quarter do the same for the new quarter? Then you only get a half quarter outcome reviewed each time and only review the half executed OKRs.
I mean, the mid-quarter is reviewing for the half. The retro is the whole quarter. So you're looking back over the whole entity. What worked, what didn't, what did we learn? You're summarizing it. You're putting together the whole quarter. So the mid-quarter retro just makes sure it holds people accountable. We're getting people to present how they've done, what's working, what's not. It means people have to be engaged. They have to think about it. They have to, it will drive people to think about what they've done and what they're trying to achieve. The retro is very much about taking that whole information and summarizing it, documenting it, making sure each team and leadership have thought through what worked and what didn't. So the mid is for half the quarter. The retro is for the full quarter. It needs to be for the full quarter.
You know what I found very useful, I think if it's for the past year, this is what we're seeing most of our customers doing. Every team does OKR check-ins on a regular cadence, either weekly or bi-weekly, right? And then they also do monthly cross-functional OKR meetings, right? So this way, if you are meeting on a regular cadence, mid-quarter review, you might think that it's unnecessary. It really depends on how much you need to learn, or like how many instances do you need to have for learning from your current process, right? Or from what is working, what is not working. And it also depends on how big your organization is, because you don't have to bring exactly the same people together weekly, monthly, mid-quarter. I mean, end of the quarter doesn't count. But if it's the same people we're talking about. The weekly check-ins will do it all because you are kind of already discussing those things. But imagine if you're only doing internal team meetings with about the OKR check-ins with the team that is involved with the OKR. Obviously, you need to have some cross-functional alignment sessions, and those could be your monthly reviews. Or if monthly reviews is too much for you and you cannot handle that often, then it's mid-quarter review that could serve that purpose, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about who is participating and what the agenda is. Also, just like to finish this topic off a little bit, I'm a true believer that meeting needs to have an action plan as an outcome, right? You don't meet to throw new ideas in. What you meet for is like you already have something in mind and you meet to make a decision or to align between different teams to present the highlights of what is working and what is not working. So not meetings for the sake of meetings. Very often companies, they say, oh, we have too many meetings, so we just need to cancel them all. Well, that's a mismatched cause and effect. So the consequence of having too many meetings is because your meetings are not effective. So it's not about reducing the amount of meetings, although sometimes it is, but about improving their quality, right? Yeah. So do take a look at those links that we shared in chat, and I hope that those will be useful. Now let's move on to the next question, and it's more about pushback from the teams. What if the team is demotivated and pushing back on the OKR rollout? Any advice on how to motivate the team to give it a try?
I think the big question is, why are they demotivated? Pretty much we've always seen, is it we've written bad OKRs, or is it they feel they aren't seeing OKR progress? Is it the team isn't working on the right projects, plans, initiatives to drive and see OKR progress? I think you have to stand back and understand where is the problem and what is causing the pushback. Ultimately, the OKRs, well-written OKRs, should engage and motivate a team. Often when it's forced or it's top-down, cascaded down an organization, you can see problems. You can also see problems where we put KPIs in the OKRs, and you can see problems where the team doesn't feel like it has any say in the OKRs, and there's different reasons. It's really about what is causing the problem. Sometimes it's too many OKRs. There's a multitude of reasons why. You have to get to the bottom of what's the root cause of it. What is making people frustrated with the OKR process? And it will happen. You know, it happens usually because of poorly thought through OKRs and poorly thought rollout. Anna, do you have any other comments on that?
No, I think you covered it all pretty much. We, in the OKR master course that we cover, like there is a whole chapter dedicated to what happens at every stage during the quarter in the goal setting cycle, why people get demotivated or disengaged, and how that reflects on the quality of the OKR. So for everyone who is struggling to motivate the team, I think the OKR master course would be a good solution to try to learn the best strategies, how to deal with that. For now, let's move on to the next question. I think it's the question about personal, individual financial rewards and OKRs. I'm going to read it, but there might be several interpretations of the questions. Would it be counterproductive to use goal sheets for individuals and the OKR process together, since linkages to rewards may impede collaboration?
Yes.
So,
I mean, most companies have some sort of performance rewards. Depends, you know, what they are, whether it's company-wide or whether it's individual or whether it's team-based. You may well have those. Usually they're around KPIs or measurements for individuals, something that's trackable, traceable, etc. It shouldn't be the OKRs. The whole point of OKRs is really about making sure we get collaboration and you know, We need to make sure that we don't inhibit collaboration and we don't inhibit thinking about how to improve things. Basically, what happens is if somebody says to me, you know, you're going to be paid based on your OKRs, my KRs, I'll be trying to reach the lowest number possible, not the highest, but the lowest. That's why you don't do it. The second thing is collaboration isn't about individuals. It's about getting the team to collaborate, think, discuss, come up with the best ideas. So the two things are completely separate. You may well have them both. You know, your compensation pay and your OKRs sit in a similar area, but they are not linked together.
Yeah, I don't know why and how does it come about that many teams, they want to phrase every single thing that they're doing in the shape and form of OKRs. That never works, right? There are some things that you just do and they're deliverables. There is no need to go through the OKR process to define a simple deliverable because it's just a deliverable, right? OKRs are about improvement and change and things that you need to figure out, something new, exciting, right? That you want to make better for your team, not every single thing that you do. I think we have another question in general. I think it's just we can do a summary on the topic of performance evaluation. Can we use OKRs for performance evaluation?
You could, but it defeats the purpose of using them. It's not what they were ever designed for. You shouldn't. You will break OKRs. That simple.
Yeah, I will share an article on this topic in the chat shortly, but for now, the next question is, what would you say is the best way to manage shared OKRs? For instance, if there are 2 or 3 departments driving one company objective.
It's exactly what I explained earlier. It's super common, you know. Let me try and get back there wherever it was. Not there. It's just before this section. Yeah. The way we're going to do that is we're going to set a company objective. That is the overarching objective. It's the thing that leadership say, this is the topic we need to improve. Hey, we need to become the whatever it might be in a certain geographic region and deliver the best customer satisfaction or best customer experience. And that's our unique strategy. And that helps the teams to then align around that objective. So what you're talking about is setting a company objective and getting the teams to develop their OKRs. Their OKR progress will show whether we're achieving this. If these are correct, this will be moved forward. So if the teams make progress on the OKRs, we will be making progress on the focused area set by leadership. Does that make sense, Anna?
Yeah, I mean, we did cover it in detail during the webinar. So yeah. I think the confusion comes about when company OKRs or company objective is phrased poorly. So if your company objective is to increase revenue by 50%, and this is where your question is coming from, then that's a whole different story. Yeah. Because objectives are problems to be solved. They're not targets or metrics, because if objectives were targets and metrics, it's just, reiterating what you want. It's not really planning for how you're going to achieve it. It's a very big, objective is not a synonym for what you want, right? You can say as many times as we want, we can say as many times as we want that we want to reach 1 gazillion weekly daily active users, or we want $1 billion by the end of the quarter. That doesn't make it an objective. That's just wishful thinking, right? So we need something tangible.
It's still a KPI. The problem is that then what happens is we link everything together hard, in our minds, literally. And then we go, but if we complete these, that won't drive our $1 billion revenue here. Yeah, you're right. It's not guaranteed, but nothing is. We need to separate where do we want to achieve. And if we haven't got the ideas for how we're going to grow or improve or change to reach that, it's a dream. It all has to align. You know, that's the point of it.
Yeah, I feel like more and more these days, it's like leaders think that we set a target and then the teams, they figure it out. And that's just delegating important decisions. That's not going to happen. You need, as a leadership team, which consists usually of team leaders plus the, C-level executives, to discuss what worked in the past, what didn't work, how are we going to move forward. And yes, it sounds scary. Yes, it has a lot of different, maybe conflicting views, but without having those conversations, team OKRs are just always going to be bad quality, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that just doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have another question, which is more of, again, a case study. And let me read it out loud. Let me first put it into our questions sheet. There you go. So in Agile, we keep very strict separation between reviews and retros because we want to prepare the meetings in very different ways. A sprint review for us is for looking into deliverables and finding future improvements for the team. A retro is for focusing on the process and collaboration. So as an Agile coach, if I were to create a true Agile version of an OKR cycle, I would do a mid-quarter review and an end-quarter review to keep that focus tight and clear. But the quarterly retrospective would then be only to focus on the process and the collaboration around OKRs. Do you see any challenges at this with this approach?
Yes, because if you haven't thought about the process and what worked and what didn't and what would we change, most teams or most companies are not only the Agile teams. When we're talking about Agile, we're going to be talking about sales teams, marketing teams, finance teams, and those Agile processes, in the strict sense of Agile processes, will work well for a development group. Taking it that literally for finance or sales won't. The retro here needs to be company-wide, it needs to be of all teams, and it needs to be up and down the organization. It's a little bit different to the true Agile retrospective. It should be what worked, what didn't, and the other things that are included in retrospectives, but it needs to be about what did we learn, what worked, what didn't, so others can see it as well. It needs to be a bit more expansive.
Yeah, we have the template for OKR retrospectives, and it's different from sprint retros, because sprint retro is focused on this one specific project or epic or user story that the team is discovering or working on, right? Yeah. OKR retrospective is more focused on the business needs and the impacts that those prioritized projects and sprints have produced, right? So it's more OKRs. They have both strategic and tactical nature, while sprints and Scrum process is only executional tactical.
Yes.
Right. So you need to have both, because you need to plan first, to have some strategy, lay out so that you know where you're going. And then you need to get more specific so that people don't keep just talking for 3 months and actually do something.
Yeah.
Right. There is a question about company level objectives or company level goals. Is it worth just having KPIs on the company level, or should there be OKRs on the company level? And isn't it the same?
No, it's not at all the same. You should have, a company will always have KPIs. We have revenue, cash flow, all the things that run a business. We have those. We need to measure them. Our OKRs at the company level are really objectives. They're alignment, they're directional, they're the direction to sale, however you think about it. Separating them stops or forces leaders to think about setting the direction for the company. What is the next focus point for the quarter to improve on? If you start combining them, the leadership will just say, reach 1 million, reach 10 million, get more sales, improve something. It's not great. It doesn't help drive. And it's really about making sure that the leadership, financially, we need the KPIs and we need to achieve them, but how and what is it we focus on, time and efforts, and what do we believe are the right things to fix and improve on to drive the business forward is important. It's separating them or combining them just ends up a mess, and it ends up sending the wrong signals. Usually just ends up where somebody writes, get more sales, puts a target in, cascades it down to the sales team, puts something in, cascades it down to the marketing team or another team. Doesn't help build and collaborate and think about driving the business forward.
Oh, we have a really interesting question. We haven't
Go
had
on.
this one for a while. Based on your experience, what kind of industries, sectors, or businesses does OKRs works best for? It might not be suited for certain kinds of businesses, isn't it?
Well, I guess if you don't want to improve, don't do OKRs. That's probably the only one where it doesn't work. I mean, most businesses want to improve. They're trying to improve something. And not just businesses, you know, we have non-profit organizations, we have such an array of customers. It doesn't have to even be thinking about business, but whether it's a service industry or a media marketing industry, or whether it's a traditional production type industry, or whether it's a high-tech startup, all of them can use OKRs. The only reason I could think you wouldn't want to do it or couldn't use it is you have no intentions of improving. If you're not trying to improve anything, don't bother. But if you are trying to improve something, you probably have to think about the direction to improve. And that's really what the OKRs are setting out for you. It's aligning from the top of the company down to get people focused on getting the right things done with their improvement time.
But that being said, OKR's process would look slightly differently in different types of organization.
If you have no product yet, maybe it doesn't make sense yet to use OKRs. If you're a startup and you have no product market fit, there isn't processes per se to improve. You're still trying to find your way. Probably you'd have to do something a little bit differently. Later on, yes, you would want to use OKRs. So it a little bit depends how early you are and are you looking to improve? Because if you're not looking to improve, there's no point in using OKRs.
Yeah, I think not just OKRs, any like goal setting process involving people in the organization is not going to work if there is no willingness to have important discussions. So if there is no willingness to actually talk to each other and figure things out, not just OKRs, nothing is going to work, right? And that's a little bit hard to fix, but not to say that it's not fixable. Speaking of which, I'm going to put another link, which is a case study of exactly this problem when people weren't talking to each other and how to get around that and how to roll out OKRs. So just give me 1 second to check if there are any more questions. So final call. We don't have any more questions right now. So anyone who wants to ask something, go ahead and ask now, or then you would have to reach out to us via email since we will be wrapping this up. Okay, there are no more questions. The link is in the chat, so everyone who wants to bookmark it, go ahead and do that. And thank you so much, Richard. This was a great session as usual.
Thanks, Anna, and thank you, everybody, all the other Weekdone team answering questions on the background, and everybody for attending. I hope it was useful. Please, please, please fill in the survey. We'd love to hear what you liked, what you didn't like, and how we could improve things. Super. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.